Good morning, everybody. And in the words of one of my favorite comedian, John Oliver, welcome, welcome, welcome. So welcome to the sector guide, the draft sector guide for energy efficiency, the GCF sector guide for energy efficiency webinar. And we hope to basically walk you through this sector guide that we prepared. And then in the end, we will have question and answer. So my name is Sabine Basnet. I am an energy efficiency specialist in the fund. And as an energy practitioner, I think this is a pure something that just excites me, and I hope it excites you as well. And then we're looking forward to doing much more as we go along. Before we get the show on the road, just a couple of housekeeping measures. There is no chat function, so we would really like to make this webinar as interactive as possible. So there is a Q&A section right at the bottom of the screen. Please hit that and enter as many questions as you want, and we will try to get through those. As well as this, for this session, we have live interpretation in Spanish, and you will see this little globe on the bottom of the screen again. If you hit that and hit Spanish, you will get Spanish translation live as well. So just in case you don't like my English, bad joke. So let's get the show on the road. As we all know, as we are moving towards net zero, as we are moving towards more renewable energy going forward, and energy transition, the role of energy efficiency has become even more important. You know, as we are looking to grow, get economic growth, leading to sustainable growth. You know, the factoring in the utilization of energy, the optimization of energy is so critical. And this is where I think the GCF also feels the same as well. And then, you know, as we're moving towards transition to a more climate, to a better climate world and to fight climate change, this is a critical path for the GCF to follow. And we are so happy that you are with us on this ride. So for that, we thank you very much. And we thank all of the participants that are here today on this session, as well as in the next one. Thank you so much. So the structure of the webinar, we will first start off with an introduction of the sector guides and the purpose of the sector guides by the Director of Division of Mitigation and Adaptation, Dr. Herman Velasquez. And then we will basically present the sector guides in a summary version with my colleagues, Peggy, Ivo, Adrian, and myself. And then the fun begins. And then we have a distinguished group of panel members across from the GCF, from our country division to our quality assurance, to our private sector teams, and then all of us that are speaking. And then we'll get to that. I will introduce the panel once we get to the Q&A side. But before we get started, I just wanted to also acknowledge the work from GreenMax Capital Advisors, who were, so Alex Labua, John McLean, and Maxime Titov, who set the stage for the sector guides. They did the preliminary work to really kind of bring the guides to its fruition. And then with the help of Peggy and the team, we were able to finalize it to the state that it is now. So I thank everybody that contributed to this sector guide. It's been a work of love and passion, so I hope we can move this forward. Now, without much ado, I would like to basically ask Dr. Velasquez to get the show running, and in the words of Captain Picard, energize us, Jerry.
Welcome to the GCF Draft Sectoral Guideline Consultation webinar on energy efficiency, and thank you for your participation. The GCF is a unique global platform that is responding to climate change by investing on low emission and climate resilient development. GCF was established by 194 governments to limit or reduce greenhouse gas emissions in developing countries, and is also helping vulnerable societies adapt to the unavoidable impacts of climate change. Given the urgency and seriousness of this challenge, the GCF is mandated to make an ambitious contribution to the united global response to climate change. The GCF board, in decision B1708, requested the Secretariat to undertake additional analysis, taking into consideration the potential investment priority areas presented in document GCF B0906, to identify specific result areas where targeted GCF investment would have the most impact. As part of this mandate, and in line with its work program since 2019, the Secretariat has been working on the development of sectoral guidelines across GCF's 8 result areas. The guidance seeks to provide an overview and understanding of country needs and of the potential to deliver the greatest impact in support of country priorities. The sectoral guides will provide information on how targeted GCF investment aligned with country priorities could have the most impact for each sector to drive paradigm shift and demonstrate strong climate impacts. Furthermore, the guidelines aim to inform the development of funding proposals that are in high quality, meet GCF's investment criteria, and identify opportunities for high impact paradigm shifting investments in each sector. The draft guides were developed through a consultative and collaborative process with technical experts from each sector. This webinar is a critical part of this consultation process. I therefore invite all of you to actively participate in this process. Following the consultation, the draft sectoral guidelines will be updated based on feedback received from stakeholders. Thank you very much, and we look forward to receiving your feedback.
Good day, everybody. My name is Sabine Basnit. I am the Financial Institutions Manager and the Private Sector Facility in the Green Climate Fund. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to the sector guide, the draft sector guide on energy efficiency. As we say here on energy efficiency, welcome to the first days of your lives. As you all know from the International Energy Agency, energy efficiency is considered as the first energy. And given that it's first energy, it's also the energy saved is a resource for energy generation. So therefore, this is the global resource when it comes to energy generation. So therefore, energy efficiency has a critical path to play in not just an energy generation, but in the climate mix as a whole. So therefore, we would like to walk you through the sector guide on how we feel, how the GCF sees energy efficiency playing out. It's a vital, like I said, it's a vital piece of our larger investment work that we do. And I'm so delighted to be joined by my fellow colleagues in this webinar, which include Peggy Mishke, who will be walking us through the context, and then followed by Adrian Sobin Park, who will walk us through the different pathways that we have identified in the sector guide. And then I will talk, obviously, myself on the financial arrangements. And then we will wrap it up with the case studies by my other colleague, Eva Bischling. So again, just to repeat, we will have the context, then the paradigm shifting pathways, the financial financing the paradigm shifting pathways, and then case studies. So without much ado, let me pass the floor to Peggy so that we can walk through how we see the energy efficiency landscape looking like for now and in the near future. Over to you, Peggy.
Many thanks for the introduction. My name is Peggy Mishke. I'm the founder and managing director of Econergy PM, a clean energy and energy efficiency advisory company based in Copenhagen, Denmark. My pleasure now to bring us a little bit into the context of the GCF Sectoral Energy Efficiency Guide. And we have here something just in the daily news now. This year, this April, energy efficiency, energy security, energy savings actions very prominent for at least here in Europe. So in times of crisis like the current war in Ukraine, also the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, there is a lot of focus in the daily news on energy efficiency and actions and what everybody can do. Some citations here from the EU Energy Commissioner that, for example, stated last year that energy efficiency is the unsung hero, and without energy efficiency, nothing would happen. It's impossible to reach or very difficult to reach net zero targets. And everybody needs to understand and be considerate of the amount of energy we are consuming. Same also from the Energy Agency, the director, who's also really stressing energy efficiency measures in the latest reports and analyses. And just maybe as an interesting background, IEA and also the European Commission worked together this April to update key energy saving actions for basically every citizen here in Europe and beyond. And you can see in the middle graph, for example, it's stressed that we should consider optimizing our heating and air conditioning system. We should consider personal transport choices, how to best save fuel, how to review our own installations in the buildings we live, and also take advantage of all the options we have thanks to digitalization, and consider working remotely, and so also save energy. So this reminds us a little bit on maybe the oil crisis and then the popularity energy efficiency gained. And yeah, we are back to this. So that's why also the GCF sectoral guide on energy efficiency is really very timely, very important, and we believe also very, very helpful to advance energy efficiency actions on the ground, and hopefully help a lot of accredited entities of the GCF to design and then implement energy efficiency projects and programs. As a background, also in the beginning of the energy efficiency guide, you will see the focus, which is highlighted in green on the left side. So we look a lot on industrial energy efficiency, as well as material efficiency, resource efficiency. We use a very broad definition of energy efficiency. Of course, there's also something on the latest energy efficient appliance equipment, standards, practices, labeling, cooling, advancements in cooling for buildings, and even going to city districts is also tackled. And we push a lot the narrative also to have energy system planning practices highlighted and characterized and clarified more in detail, because we want to have transformational change and big advancements in energy efficiency. There's also, as energy efficiency is a very cross-sectoral topic and need for both climate adaptation and mitigation, you will see also that we link to every other sectoral GCF guide. They are listed there on the right side of the slide. And just to name a few examples, for example, for the agricultural guide, energy efficiency links easily through efficient irrigation practices. And for example, thinking of the best water pumping technologies, practices, programs. Another example for cities, efficient district heating and cooling network planning, how to integrate heat and cooling networks within energy networks, and how to couple it with electricity grid, for example, is a very, very important topic and advancing in many countries. Another example is for the health sector guide, where now with COVID-19 pandemic, we've noticed a huge need that we need efficient cold supply chains in many, many countries. And also there, of course, energy efficiency plays a very big role. So just to sum up here on the introduction of the guide, you find a very good linkages also to many already published guides. And we encourage you to really take a systematic approach and probably design many cross-sectoral programs and projects in the future. Here's, as per the guide, also an introduction and status of the current global baseline for energy efficiency. So you see on the left side the global sectoral emissions data, the most recent available data compiled by the World Resources Institute, dating back to 2016. And there you see in which parts of the economy, in which parts of a sector are most greenhouse gas emissions produced. And this then gives, of course, guidance already for very ambitious energy efficiency programs where to focus. And we encourage countries, accredited entities to also detail such analyses in their funding proposals, of course, and then stress the narrative why a program is designed in such a way and how it links to energy efficiency improvements in the future. So energy efficiency is a critical systemic topic, and we again encourage you to look at production, delivery, and consumption of energy, and even consider also material efficiency topics, process-related topics, to design very, very good energy efficiency programs. On the right side, you see another interesting baseline graph on country energy intensity baselines, and this is both for so-called industrialized developed countries, but also emerging market economies. You basically know one size fits all approach is possible, of course. Every country has its own infrastructure, economic history, country situations. But in global analytical work, modeling, in energy efficiency coalitions, such kind of benchmarks are very, very common to use as a kind of guidance also on ambition for energy transition pathways, net zero pathways. So this graph basically gives you on one side the annual energy use per capita, considering all a country's economy on kilowatt hours. And then on the other side, you will have the GDP of a country's economy per capita, and in constant international US dollars, so corrected for inflation and potential price differences between countries. And these data are the most recent available from the World Bank. And yeah, this gives some guidance already where your energy efficiency baseline could be described and analyzed more in detail in GCF funding proposals. And yeah, we encourage you also throughout the guide to really take advantage of existing international energy efficiency data and analytical work to build up and make a solid narrative for your energy efficiency programs and project funding proposals in the future. We do this because we have to advance a massive net zero target pathway towards 2050, a massive energy system transformation pathway. And according to experts everywhere, research institutions everywhere, policymakers everywhere, really important to consider energy efficiency and even think of energy efficiency first in order to deliver maximum impact and also have quick savings and economic advantages for a country quickly. So on the left side here, you see a very recent IRENA analysis, the actual net zero scenario report from IRENA for a global world energy transition until 2050. And then looking into detail on a lot of sectors and taking the first year baseline 2021 and then calculating it to 2050. And just by looking at the graph, one understands how big and rapid continuous changes are needed across all sectors. An example for industry, you see that, and it's also noted on the slide that, for example, industrial emissions, all industry expected to fall from current levels 2021 by around 11 gigatons CO2 equivalent, which you see on the graph is more than 20% of the current actual global greenhouse gas emission level. And this needs to go negative in just 4 decades. So it's a huge ambition to progress on the ground with concrete action. And we also know from a lot of other studies, global energy demand will also increase due to climate change and temperature increases, especially from space cooling for buildings. It's in many studies projected to triple from current levels to 2050. That means even further energy efficiency efforts need to be implemented. And we have right now in April, we have already a quite drastic heat wave in India and Pakistan, which then of course translate in maybe new programs being designed to think of the best ways for air conditioning, cooling, and so on. And this links very well to the guide and the topics, and especially also a pathway we have in the guide. In general, to sum up, since many years, it's clear in many international global energy scenarios that energy efficiency will need to deliver something in the order of magnitude of 35% of cumulative global CO2 emission savings to 2050 to reach the goals of the 2015 Paris Agreement with a high likelihood. So here again, think energy efficiency first in every new GCF funding proposal program you suggest, even maybe if you're not starting from an energy efficiency sector approach. Energy efficiency really needs to translate in all sections of the economy to make this transformation happen as quickly and as fast as possible. Of course, energy efficiency is also supported by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's already mentioned explicitly under SDG 7, where SDG 7.3 has a global target to double the global rate of improvements in energy efficiency by 2030. This relates back to a previous slide on the country energy intensity. So electricity use per GDP needs to decrease. So countries need to be more among the front runners, which have low energy intensities. GCF also has a mission, of course, to contribute to all SDGs and SDG 7 and also enhance international cooperation in this space and translate this also into funding proposals and funding for efficient, transformative energy infrastructure planning. Here also, again, energy efficiency is not just SDG 7. We take a very systematic approach in the energy efficiency guide and highlight in many sections how energy efficiency also plays a role, not just in energy sector, but also in healthcare, in education, in the water sector, and so on. And we referenced many current studies also that give a lot of more background on these topics and linkages. Unfortunately, there's still a big energy efficiency financing gap to overcome. Recent actual global investment trends in energy efficiency are also linked and explained in the context of the energy efficiency guide. We see that they have remained rather stagnant in the latest years, latest statistics compiled by UNFCCC. So we have energy efficiency benchmark investments in the order of magnitude around 230, 240 billion US dollar per year, I believe. And then when this is compared with modeling and modeling towards 2050 in these energy transition net zero pathways, IEA gives some scenarios for this, and an example is given on the graph on the slide. So one sees just by order of magnitude that the actual data reported are not yet in this range, or they need to increase a lot more in the next decades to make this happen. And the most recent also detailed energy efficiency finance scenarios we could find for the guide look very broadly also, and they see, of course, efficiency as part of a wider low carbon technology shift. And they do not yet account for the 2021 COP26 Glasgow net zero ambitions. So with more ambitions from public sector, private sector coming in, such modeling scenarios need to be updated, but it's very likely that we will see even further funding needs for energy efficiency, and accounting also, of course, of cost reductions for many energy efficiency technologies and practices in different countries. Here we see also, unfortunately, still there is a gap in energy efficiency data, energy efficiency finance data. So we encourage in the guide also for much more data sharing as part of GCF, energy efficiency funding proposals and programs. And maybe we can also ask everyone taking part in the consultation and having expert knowledge in this sector and on the finance side to please also submit maybe some more inputs and data sources, benchmarks for energy efficiency finance data to us, and then we can include this in the final version of the guide and share with everybody. And here's the last slide for the introduction. We also made up a lot of effort to have a very detailed annex available for the accredited entities designing energy efficiency programs. And the annex gives for the pathways, the guide specifies a long list of coalitions working on very different energy efficiency topics across countries, across sectors, across institutions. And I believe we have more than 40 coalitions for institutions, NGOs, research networks, policy maker networks, and so on, compiled to really give quick links and suggestions where to find good practices, where to find more data, and how to link up also with the growing energy efficiency expert community around the world. And this slide just gives you the logos of all these, of some of these institutions. I will not go into details. I will, and we know, working in the field, many ones that are there since many years. Maybe just to highlight a few new ones and trends we see, there's a lot coming up for hydrogen. There's a lot coming up for industry, for transport. And there's also more and more coming on the material side, especially plastics. Here also, if we are not yet aware of something that is a helpful network, a coalition for all accredited entities, we welcome further inputs as part of the consultation. And this was it from my side here from Copenhagen, Denmark. Thank you for listening. Looking forward to the comments. And I'm handing over to my GCF energy efficiency colleagues, Sabine and Adrian. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peggy, for setting that the context. And then, energy efficiency is a huge thing. And as we move forward for GCF, we're really looking at how do we do more? And then that's where the paradigm shift pathways comes into play in the energy efficiency sector as well. So the way that the GCF is looking at all of our sectors is we're looking at it from a four pathway paradigm shift pathways. One is on the transformational planning. The other one is on catalyzing innovation. The other one is mobilizing finance as a fund. And then most important also is bringing all of this together in in a knowledge management platform. So when we're looking at energy efficiency, the breadth of the energy efficiency and what's needed for financing of energy efficiency to meet the climate targets is huge. So as a fund of $10 billion, we can do only so much. So what we have done, and which we think is a priority, as from Peggy's description as well, is we're looking at three pathways that we feel that are instrumental for us in the near term. One is on scaling up industrial energy efficiency. Industries have a huge role to play in GHG emissions, and they are actually instrumental in terms of really bringing in economic growth, as well as where energy efficiency plays a pivotal role. And then the second is enhancing space efficiency. Now, space, where is in quotation marks, because we're not just looking at buildings, we're looking at all different types of built areas that that we are in touch with. That includes industrial buildings to residential buildings, commercial buildings, as well as the different servicescapes that are in play. And as the building space, the space efficiency, the space energy requirement is quite substantial, and there is a lot that is being done. And then the third pathways for us is really looking at, incentivizing paradigm shift in energy efficiency, which is through high efficient equipments and appliances. This is a critical piece for us. And as we see in the sector as well, there are a lot of great equipments that are coming into play. And then, when we need to basically standardize them, we need to figure out what are the ones that are going to basically have the best impact for us. So therefore, we feel that this is something that we as the GCF can actually work with our AEs to make a substantial dent on. So to walk us through all of these three paradigm shift areas and what we see are the barriers, as well as what are the different interventions that we think that's possible, let me hand over the floor to my colleague and friend, Adrian. Adrian, over to you.
Thank you, Sabin. The first paradigm shift pathway is scaling up industrial energy efficiency. Among a few barriers identified, the first barrier is industrial development policy and market uncertainty. Oftentimes, different stakeholders may have different understanding and commitment, and this policy barrier can arise at many different levels. Together with lack of awareness on bankability of emerging manufacturing technologies and value chains, this can affect the confidence of investors and lead to a higher risk perception and subsequently increase capital costs for infrastructure projects. Capital scarcity to finance innovations for technology change is another barrier, which may be a result of liquidity in the banking sector, but also a result of lending restrictions, institutional risk aversion, the requirement of additional collaterals, and too low investment attractiveness perceived. Breakthrough low-carbon manufacturing technologies might require dedicated venture funding windows to access patient growth capital and junior equity investors, in particular for high-risk emerging markets. Lack of technical expertise and planning capacity is a critical barrier to overcome. It is important for best practices and lessons learned to be shared to help technical experts to overcome their difficulties faced in terms of integrating emerging low-carbon industrial technology into their day-to-day work. Some potential high-impact actions to scale up industrial energy efficiency include, for example, mainstreaming ambitious and mandatory industrial energy efficiency standards for energy-intensive manufacturing industries and value chains, and also mainstreaming technical and financial planning and programming among critical public and private actors for increased industrial value chain efficiency. To catalyze innovation, impact actions could include demonstrating technology innovations in critical energy and resource-intensive manufacturing value chains, promoting alternative low or zero-emission solutions, and demonstrating anchor investments in new breakthrough high-risk and high-potential business models to generate investment proof points. To mobilize large-scale finance, actions could include utilizing guarantees and political risk insurances, junior equity for early stage, and designing industrial energy-specific expert financing schemes. Lastly, knowledge management to share context-specific knowledge and experience is critical, and this could include sharing real-time and systematic data and strengthening partnerships and alliances. The second paradigm shift pathway is enhancing space energy efficiency. Existing regulatory and legislative frameworks are needed to facilitate systematic infrastructure modernization in the built environment and to assure sector coupling between electricity and district heating and cooling services. However, oftentimes these are not yet fully in place in many developing countries. Furthermore, lack of awareness of climate mitigation and adaptation benefits of space efficiency often lead to underestimation of demand for heating and cooling and associated cost savings and employment benefits. It is important to bring different public and private stakeholders to foster common understanding and commitment. Another barrier under this pathway include climate change threats and risks, such as flooding, that may affect the structural foundations of buildings and increase the risk of stranded assets. Financial institutions are often unfamiliar with private debt financial products designed specifically for energy renovations in buildings and perceive energy efficiency loans as high-risk investments. Lastly, developments integrating efficient electricity and district heating and cooling services require multi-stakeholder partnerships, including public utilities, network operators, and engineering companies offering a set of technical skills for the design, planning, construction, or rehabilitation and operation of associated infrastructure. Here we show a list of potential high-impact actions to enhance space energy efficiency. This could include scaling zero carbon building design code, integrating national cooling action plans and climate adaptive heat action plans with national infrastructure strategy and short-term targets, ambitious efficiency specifications in public procurement schemes. To catalyze innovation, demonstrating optimal adaptation resilience of public and commercial spaces to heat waves could be done through piloting city-level ecosystem-based space adaptation approaches, identifying novel anchor investments in low-carbon building materials, and promoting new private sector-driven and innovative services-based business models. For example, cooling hubs, ESCOs might be potential impact actions. Mobilizing large-scale finance includes standardizing demand-side financial instruments for space efficiency across financial institutions in emerging markets, such as green mortgages or white certificates, and integrating technical innovations with de-risking instruments across financial institutions. The last paradigm shift pathway is catalyzing rapid market switch to highest efficiency appliances and equipment. Under this pathway, barriers include lack of awareness about energy efficiency standards, labels, certificates, and associated co-benefits across multiple actors involved in appliances and equipment supply chains. Integrating energy efficiency policy options consistently across regulatory frameworks and appliance and equipment and supply chains are also another barrier. Social barriers related to the ability and willingness to pay can be significant, but can be addressed by user-centric business models that allow affordable services to the recipients and matching their individual cash flows. Only limited standardized data sets are available to make rapid energy efficiency investment decisions at a highly granular level, and the challenge for investors remain in terms of lack of reliable data for a wide range of energy efficient appliances and equipment. To overcome these barriers, possible actions could include systematic harmonizing and enforcing of maps for super efficient appliances and equipment across all economic sectors, and integration with budgeting procurement plans at national, regional, and municipal levels. Supply chain, value chain innovations, and upgrades through appliances and equipment standardizations are also critical, and this could include Internet of Things and data analytics. Scaling portfolio with emerging innovative loan repayment instruments, for example, via energy performance contract bills, utility bills, on-bill financing, vendor financing, and other financing mechanisms are also in the list of high-impact actions. Lastly, scaling energy-saving insurance in nascent markets are also critical. This slide shows a summary of key actions for each paradigm shift pathways across the 4 pillars, but potential actions are not limited to this list. Next is financing paradigm shift pathways, which I will give the floor to Sabin. Over to you, Sabin.
Thank you, Adrian, for sharing with us the 3 paradigm shift areas. As you know, I mean, these are great initiatives that we think that are going to really move the envelope for energy efficiency. But at the same time, I think everybody's having the question, how do we finance them? So I think, well, I'll try to walk you through how we see it from the GCF side, how we're going to work through the financing bit. So before we really get into how, and what are the different instruments, I think what we need to also understand is, what are the barriers and financial barriers that are out there? I mean, I think, we've listed them out. I think the main thing is there's a lack of long-term funds and research funds for technology innovation. I mean, most of the local capital that's available, they're all short-term capital. So I think what we need is, we need that long-term patient capital to be there. And we also need to understand that, that the different financiers also need to have an understanding of what is the actual risk versus what is the perceived credit risk of projects, because these projects have a good return, but at the same time, the not understanding of the underlyings of the technology or the processes leads to more risk averseness than it should. And that's where all the paradigm, the TOC and their paradigm shifts areas that, from transformation planning to innovation that Adrian just shared comes into play. And then the other innovation barriers is, it's high rate of interest. Given, and this is basically linked to the perceived risk. Generally, when risks are high, the one way that most financiers tackle this is by putting a little bit of a premium on the financing that's available. So I think and this is another big barrier that's coming out. And the other barrier that we've seen a lot is really on collateral-based lending. So I mean, see most of the work that we do in the developing countries, the banking systems and the financing systems are still based on collateral-based lending. It's not really on project finance. So we need to really kind of move the envelope. That's where the de-risking really comes in, is to basically kind of use different instruments to move away from move a little bit away into the collateral financing, collateral-based financing. And the other barrier really is the scarcity and high cost of project sponsors equity for large-scale projects. Equity is a major barrier that we've seen in the developing world where we work. So I mean, I think getting that equity into play is a key thing, and then we need to figure out and we are working to figure out what is the best way to bring in equity type vehicles into the energy efficiency world as well. And I think this is the CapEx and the OpEx question versus the OpEx question seems to be something that I think is one of the biggest barriers, is because I mean, there's a fight for capital. Don't get me wrong. When we're looking at industries, I mean, it's about either expansion or is it about energy efficiency? And whenever expansion and energy efficiency come into play, the fight is always going to be won by expansion, because that is something that the industry knows. I mean, the steel industry will always produce more steel. They're not going to go in for a new hydrogen-based, burner system because it's efficient. So, this is going to be a big issue, and then that's why I think we need to basically put in the different elements, everything from transformation planning in terms of the policies to technology development to different sorts of financing instruments. That basically all of this wrapped up together in a nice little package would be that financing mechanism that we're really looking for. So to tackle these barriers, the GCF provides different financial instruments. So we have loans, we have guarantees, we have grants, and we have equity. And as you can see, I mean, we haven't gone for a really crazy picture in terms of really kind of putting things together. But I think what makes sense here is these are balls. These are balls that are basically just being juggled around. I mean, I think depending on the project and how the project looks like, what are the different elements, we will basically swing between how do you finance a policy piece of work for MEPS through grants, and then how do you now operationalize that MEPS? We could basically use loans or guarantees. Like for instance, when I said that, when we were talking about building in, moving away from collateralized capital lending to more project finance. This is where guarantees come in. So we can work with partial risk guarantees to basically kind of, offset that risk of the financiers, so that, they can actually, take the equity and the debt equity ratio can be moved towards a little bit more favorable condition for the borrowers. At the same time, when we're looking at equity, for instance, we will come in as anchor equity. We will come in as the first level of equity, so that that other commercial financiers could come into play. So we will take on the first risk of our project. So I mean, there are multiple ways of doing things, and then I think this is the beauty of what we do here in the GCF is, as we have multiple balls which we can basically juggle in the best way to basically fit the project and the program as we go forward. And I think for energy efficiency, we need all of these to come together. And so therefore I think this is where I want to be prescriptive, but at the same time I think being prescriptive basically loses the value of how innovation and financial innovation can be part of the energy efficiency matrix. Now with that, just to kind of see what we've done, how we've done things, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Ivo, who will walk us through a couple of case studies that we've done in the GCF, which kind of highlight the different things that both Adrian, myself, and Peggy talked about. Over to you, Ivo.
Thank you, Sabine and Adriana, Peggy, for setting the context and highlighting the urgency of action, as well as presenting the 3 paradigm-shifting pathways, the barriers, and the many options there are for supporting energy efficiency measures. I would like to complement with 3 interesting examples from our GCF portfolio that would illustrate those 3 pathways, as well as giving a very quick overview of what GCF seeks from proposals that are submitted for funding. The first example is the high impact program for the corporate sector that is implemented in 7 countries. This program illustrates pathway number 1 about accelerating the shift to low emission sources and practices for carbon intensive industries. This to reduce energy, material, and carbon intensity. As you have seen, industries can be a major source of emissions and can be relatively hard to decarbonize. For this program, GCF provides about 250 million in subordinated and senior loans and about 5 million in grants. And this in turn mobilizes around 750 million. By the grant resources, the project addresses barriers related to lack of technical expertise, as well as planning capacity. Specifically, the identification of high impact climate projects, capacity building to address the lack of corporate capacity to conduct climate change planning, and the integration of analysis and gender considerations into the investment planning. Also, sector-level decarbonization roadmaps are supported with the involvement of all actors, such as corporates, industry association, public sector, and CSO. The loan resources are used for an innovative financing mechanism to, first of all, address the financial barriers for the uptake of the technologies, such as high financial costs, high perceived risk, and suitability of the financial products, as usually you need a longer tenors. Secondly, which is the interesting innovation, I think, the financing mechanism will also promote the uptake of corporate climate governance and management practices. There's a link between the interest and the performance on climate and corporate governance. So when a certain milestone is achieved, interest is reduced. Another name for this is also sustainability-linked loans. Those are already available in EU markets, but not yet for corporates in the participating countries. So in sum, this project combines promoting the uptake of low carbon technologies with stimulating behavioral changes at the management level. The second example is the cooling facility. This program helps to address the huge challenges there are in cooling, as already indicated by Peggy. According to an IEA report, at this moment there are about 3.6 billion cooling appliances used in the world, and this would rise to about 14 billion by 2050 if cooling is provided to everybody who needs it. If this happens with inefficient cooling appliances using refrigerants with high global warming potential, the increase in energy demand and GHG emissions will be huge. So this example illustrates pathway number 2 and 3, which are about enhancing space energy efficiency, so in this case cooling, as well as catalyzing rapid market shift to highest efficiency appliances. So this program is one of the first global cooling facilities, and it aims to address the various barriers in the sector and provide key solutions, and this all from multiple angles. So it's really a comprehensive intervention. It works, for instance, on addressing regulatory and policy barriers, and via technical assistance, increase of capacities of state actors, but also financial institutions, development of new business models, increasing awareness, improving access to financing, but also on different technologies, such as passive cooling. Passive cooling is a building design approach that focuses on improving indoor thermal comfort with low or no energy consumption, or for instance, appliances using refrigerants with zero or low global warming potential. So this program really caters to the different country contexts and needs, for example, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This includes cooling-related products and services for buildings, but also cold chains, like vaccine supply chains and health facilities. Total financing is about 880 million, and GCF contributes 32 million in grants and 33.5 million in loans. Besides the reductions in GHG emissions, it is also estimated about 4 million people will benefit directly and 17 million indirectly, and benefits include risk reduction from heat waves. The third example is the energy efficient consumption loan program being implemented in Mongolia by the direct access entity Hasbank, which is a private sector entity. This program illustrates pathway 2 and 3. This program deals with heating challenges in cold regions and associated health impacts that people can face. In this case, it concerns the peri-urban areas around Ulaanbaatar, where people face extreme low winter temperatures and challenging economic conditions. As a consequence, they often use low-grade coal and rubbish in their inefficient stoves. And this is causing a lot of smoke with dire consequences for the health. So there is really a high need for heating appliances and energy-efficient housing, which this program aims to support. The grant resources of 1 million are used for awareness raising and housing evaluations to prepare for the energy efficiency measures, and the disposal management of the old appliances so that they're not used again or disposed of in a sustainable way. The GCF concessional loan resources of 9 million are supplemented with loan resources from Hasbank, also 9 million, and they are used to alleviate financing barriers. And the project is supported by JERES for $2.5 million on the energy aspects. So after these 3 interesting examples, we'd like to give a quick overview of what GCF seeks from energy efficiency projects that are submitted to GCF for funding. So basically, each funding proposal, irrespective of the sector, will be evaluated against 6 GCF investment criteria. So the first criteria is impact potential. Each funding proposal should very clearly articulate the climate problem it aims to address and the climate impact it aims to achieve. For energy efficiency, as presented already, GCF aims to support innovative technologies, business models, and partnerships that have high mitigation potential. For instance, the energy intensive and hard to decarbonize sectors. While energy efficiency projects mostly have mitigation impacts, developers are also encouraged to specify all the adaptation impacts. And here you could think about, for example, strengthening the resilience of district heating or cooling systems. This can be done through demand response to counteract peak demand or to address risk from extreme weather events. And when we talk about urban planning, you could think about green districts with green roofs, green buildings, etc. The second investment criteria is paradigm shift potential. So the FP should very clearly provide a strategy and justification on how project and its impact could be beyond a one-off project in terms of scalability, replicability, and sustainability. An example could be innovative financing model that can be tested and scaled up and replicated with GCF support. Any innovation included in the project, for instance, a technology, business model, or institutional arrangement, should also be highlighted in the funding proposal. The third investment criteria is sustainable development potential. So the project should capture the environmental, social, and gender co-benefits. For example, the project in Mongolia I just talked about will have very significant health benefits. Very important in this sector as well is that the proposal should really carefully consider the GCF environment and social policies. This to safeguard against possible negative impacts, particularly for investment in large-scale energy-efficient industrial developments or retrofits of building complexes. Projects should also be mindful of how the project aims to deliver long-term lasting solutions to the beneficiaries, including vulnerable groups. The last set of investment criteria starts with the recipient needs. So each funding proposal should clearly state the climate vulnerabilities the project aims to address, as well as the financing needs of the country and the population. The fifth criteria is country ownership. Projects should be aligned with country strategies and plans. This can be NDCs, climate plans, local plans, sectoral plans, and the institutional structures. And it should be developed through a solid stakeholder engagement with all stakeholders in the value chain, including groups that potentially may be impacted positive and negatively. The last investment criteria is efficiency and effectiveness. Particularly for energy efficiency projects, GCF expects high cost efficiencies. So project developers are encouraged to partner with local, regional, and international financial institutions to crowd in the private sector, but also to strengthen their capacity and awareness. So in the future, they can continue financing these investments. As already referred to before by Becky, these strategic partnerships are important. So project developers are encouraged to work together to implement the energy efficiency projects, because without greater international cooperation, it will be really hard to decarbonize sectors such as industries and buildings. And maybe we won't achieve the net zero targets by 2050. Cooperation can take place, for instance, on the technology innovations, as well as sharing of performance data of these innovations. After having heard this, I hope we have been able to help you a step further in the design of your energy efficiency project. If you haven't started yet, please do so, because urgent action is needed. And as you have seen from our presentation, it's a very interesting and exciting area to work in. Lots of things are happening. So we look forward to your ideas and funding proposal. Thank you so much for listening, and over to Sabine.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. And I know we said there was going to be a summary, but I think we try to be as detailed as possible on the presentation. So now we're coming to the fun part, which is the questions and answers. And any questions you have, please do. Again, like I said, please type the questions in the Q&A. Before we do that, let me just introduce my distinguished panel that I have with me. I mean, aside from the presenters, Ivo, Peggy, myself, and Adrian, we also have Vladislav Arnodov, who is our manager in our quality assurance in the division of portfolio management. And then we also have Ms. Anuparima Lamichane, regional manager for Asia, leading our country efforts in Asia. And then we also have Mr. Thomas Bishop, Climate Investment Officer in our private sector facility. So with that, let me first start off with the question that we received during our registration, and which is, I think, a very good one, I think. The question is asked, what is the recommended way of applying this sector guide? Or what is the purpose of the sector guide? I think that's a very great question, and we really thank you for that question. So could I ask either first start off with Ivo and then maybe Vlad to supplement why this guide is important, and then maybe Anupa also maybe addressing that from a country context would also be beneficial as well. So first to Ivo and then Vlad and Anupa.
Yeah, thank you, Sabine. Thank you for this important question indeed. And good morning, good afternoon, evening, everybody, depending on the region where you are. There was quite indeed a bit of information in the presentation, so it would be good to highlight the intended use of the sector guide again. So as we have seen, to reduce the dangerous impact of climate change, a lot needs to happen. And for this, significant amounts of finance is required. But however, the demand for capital is huge and there are many priorities, so governments have to make choices. So there is not enough public sector funds to do everything. So in this context, and with its public concessional capital, GCF sees its role as being catalytic. So GCF aims to support projects with the highest climate impact and aligned with the country priorities in the context of sustainable development of the countries, and catalyze private sector finance. So with its capital, it aims to mobilize additional capital. So how can GCF do that? So we aim to do it by addressing the barriers for the investments and the risk. So basically de-risking the measures. And as you have seen, as presented by Sabina Adriana, there are different kinds of barriers, right? It could be policy barriers or capacities of stakeholders, etc. So GCF tries to help actors in the market to address those barriers, and it could be via reducing or taking away the barrier. For example, if there's no, if you're a household and you want to install a solar panel on your roof and you cannot, having a new policy that would allow that would take away the barrier. You could also transfer certain perceived risks. For example, if there's a local financial institution that does not want to lend out for a certain asset, GCF could provide a partial guarantee, and by taking away part of the risk, the financial institution is able to lend. And if taking away or reducing doesn't work, lastly, it could be compensate for the risk. So, for example, if the initial capex of a technology is high because it's a new technology and the perceived risks are high, GCF can provide concessional loans with a longer tenor, bringing down the cost and making financing possible. So GCF is open for ideas with the highest climate impact and which support paradigm shift in the sector. So in this context, the sector guide aims to inspire proposal development and respond to the 3 paradigm shifting pathway. So it's not a guide on how to do things, and it's also not used for the assessment of funding proposals. The assessment is done against the 6 investment criteria. And it's basically recommended to use as early as possible. So basically when you start engaging with potential partners, then already use the sector guide. And maybe the last comment important to say is that it's a draft sector guide. So if there are suggestions on how to improve it further, please share with us these suggestions. Over.
Thanks, Ivo. I think that's a good way of setting the stage, and I think that sets the stage for Vlad and the work that Vlad does. Over to you, Vlad.
Thank you, Sabine, and a very good morning to all of our participants today. I just want to build a little bit on what Ivo has just said and about the extreme value of this draft sector guide, because it talks about paradigm shifting, and the GCF is about supporting paradigm shifting investment. So every time you come to us and look for funding, or you want to engage with the Green Climate Fund, you also have to explain how the proposed project really leads to paradigm shifting, how exactly it helps in the efforts towards mitigation of the impacts of climate change or adaptation. What is your theory of change? And if you look at the sector guide, it actually provides you with some very good ideas of how to articulate that and what exactly to focus on. So this is one of the ways that you can reflect at your energy efficiency investments. And I believe that this can be something that will help you also move forward towards better formulation of your proposals. So I also want to echo what Eva was saying and really encourage everybody who is looking into energy efficiency projects, please look at the paradigm shifting aspects, look at the pathways that are described there and see how your projects can also be adjusted. Of course, our guides are draft and they're not exhaustive, so there can be various ways to look into this, but I think they also provide a very good example on the way forward. So maybe I will stop with this one and hand over to Anupa as well, who can provide her perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Vlad. And I think that's it's a good segue as well, because I mean, like you said, we were talking about paradigm shift as a big part, and then we all of us, you, me, and Evo, were looking at it from the project side, but Anupa is on the forefront with the countries to get those paradigm shift projects in place. And then, so yeah, your thoughts and how the guide could be useful for countries as they go forward would be valuable. Anupa, over to you.
Thanks, Sabin. I think Ivo and Vlad, they have actually indicated most of the important points. Couple of things that I can add from mine. And first of all, very thank you for this very important question. How does this sector guide connect to the spectrum of the energy efficiency sector that we're looking at the GCF? In addition to one of the things that Ivo mentioned, which I really want to probably also steal the words from him, is catalyzing and addressing the gaps or the barriers. Because what we have seen at the country level, when the country is making different kind of plans, they are looking at various sectors. Energy is definitely one of the sector that they have been engaging, but we can definitely see a lot of gaps that are there at the policy level, at the capacity level, at the institutional level. And when I'm saying gaps at what level? When we are talking about transformational planning or programming, we really need to start dissecting the type of roadmaps that you want to create or the country wants to create in order to make it transformational. How can you make it transformational at all levels if you really want to focus on energy efficiency? When we look at energy planning can be dissected into so many different areas. So I think that is where GCF readiness resources, PPF resources can come in. I would like to probably focus first on the readiness resources. As most of you already know, there is 1 million per year per country readiness resources available to countries in order to address these barriers, the gaps that the countries are currently facing. So I think that is somewhere that the countries can think of in terms of identifying what are the gaps. I think the gaps are very clearly indicated or articulated in the presentation this morning. So what you can do is look into those gaps, try to identify how can you build those gaps, and look into building it into the readiness proposals in order for your country to start thinking about energy planning or energy infrastructure planning or energy efficiency planning. Because I think these are the areas what we need to look at. That's one. In order to do that, you don't only look at the policy level. You need to look at the capacity of the institutions. You need to look at what are the gaps with the different intermediaries, because these also kind of percolates down to sub-national level planning. And so I think you need to look into the whole picture. So that's one at the readiness level. The second is at the project level. So GCF also has resources that are available for project while you're designing or developing projects. That comes under the project preparation facility support. You get 1.5 million resource support per project in designing projects where you find gaps. So please do use these resources, come to us. What we really want to see is we want to be engaging with you at the origination level when you are designing these projects, when you're designing the policies, and look at the whole roadmap from moving from policy, moving from capacity building, and then moving into projects. So that is something that I probably wanted to add into what Ivo and Vlad have already mentioned. Over to you, Sabin.
Thank you so much, Anupa, and I think and thank you so much for actually bringing up the readiness and PPF. I think one of the things that we talked about a lot in the presentation and the guides and everybody else is about the funding proposal, how we see funding proposals as instrumental to climate finance, but actually the services that the GCF provides in the readiness, the funds that we have in readiness as a PPF are also very critical, and I think they really set the stage for an enabling environment that is really needed to meet those gaps as you talked about. So so I think that thank you for mentioning, and it is a resource that I think everybody in the webinar should be aware of and should utilize as much as possible. So thank you for that. Let me jump on to the next question that I just saw in the Q&A. It's from Leanne. A lot of the presentation is focused on industrial and industrial applications. What role do you see in the sector for financing support for household end users of energy efficiency appliances, heating/cooling, etc.? What is the connection with energy access there specifically, where leapfrogging into RE should be a mean maximizing E technology applications? This is a very good question, Leanne, and thank you for that. I mean, I think it's really about how we see things and how we're also trying to basically bring in different aspects of the different sectors that we have in the GCF and that we're working on. And I think the best persons to address this question would probably be Ivo, as he was working on the RE guide, and then maybe also with and Peggy from a contextual point of view on how things should happen. So could I start off with Ivo and then hand this over to Peggy?
Yeah, thanks, Sabine, and thanks, Leon, for this indeed very important question. So there are indeed billions of people with no access to energy or no access to clean energy. So energy access is actually an important topic in the sector guides. It is included, particularly in the renewable energy sector guide, which was already discussed a couple of months ago. There, a specific pathway is devoted to it. Basically, it's pathway number 3, which is about promoting access to clean energy. And basically, it looks at how to promote this in a sustainable way, and also look at the climate resilience of the societies which are benefiting. If we talk about this sector guide, it is covered as well under the 3rd pathway when it comes to the switch to energy efficient appliances. So maybe one example to share, I already pointed out before, the last case study was on energy efficiency loans in Mongolia. And that is an example of one of those projects. Besides the energy savings and the reductions on GHG emissions, it also has significant benefits for the households there, in this case, in terms of health benefits. There are more examples in the pipeline. We have a clean cooking program in Nepal, has several aspects, including technical assistance on capacity building and financing. But one important element is, and that also points to one of the issues you raised, that program includes also the shift away from the use of biomass to electricity for cooking. And then another program we also have is the one in Kenya and Senegal. It's also a clean cooking program. And an interesting aspect here is to work with the entrepreneurs, basically the people making the cook stoves and building their capacity. So on the long term, they can prepare everything themselves. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ivo. Peggy, I mean, Ivo went from the GCF angle. I mean, from a sector angle, and how the sector guide leads to this. Your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Sabine, and thanks also, Ivo. So, and hello, I introduce myself. This is Peggy Mischke from Copenhagen, Denmark, and joining also as an external expert here as part of this sector guide consultation process and development process. What I can maybe add also from an external perspective is maybe the methodology, how all the sector guides are developed, and it's part of like a request from the board to the secretariat of the GCF, and then it's already a long ongoing consultative process, and through this process and consultations, these pathways are developed and then translate into guides. And that is why these pathways come up, and it needs to be seen also in a overall perspective, not just energy efficiency guide, all the guides together as we introduced, just as a background. And the three pathways here we have, and rightly pointed out in the beginning, there is this also industry focus, is because we of course follow the state of advancements of technologies, the energy efficiency debate, and we need to see it also from a global perspective. And we did a portfolio analysis also as part of this work. And we highlight here, especially in the presentation, maybe industrial energy efficiency is kind of new, emerging, and a lot of work there to do. So maybe that's why also it comes up early here in the presentation. However, it's not the one and only energy efficiency pathway, as already pointed out. And there is no such competition, maybe I would say, between the pathways. And the order of the pathways has also no implication. It is just the way it comes up in the guide and in the presentation. It needs to be seen holistically, of course. And we look forward to further such questions and inputs to, of course, further fine-tune also the guide. Thank you. Over to you, Sabine.
Thank you so much, Peggy, and thanks for also highlighting that the different, what do you call it, the different sector guides that are there. But I think just to kind of keep on going to this one is, and since we have Tom with us, and then Tom was also part of the Mongolia project. If you could share your thoughts on, how we've actually worked to really kind of use banks to get to the households, I think that would also address some of this as well. Tom?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sabine. So I think the Mongolia project's a good example of how GCF wants to work with direct access entities. So Hasbank is a commercial bank based in Mongolia, and is a good example of a success story for direct access entities with GCF. So they have a specific team set up. They have a climate department and a team that works directly with GCF, and they've been able to have 3 funding proposals approved. So by working with these types of local banks, GCF is able to channel its climate finance at concessional rates to the types of borrowers that we really want to reach in developing countries. And that's households, MSMEs, and other types of borrowers that otherwise wouldn't have access to climate finance at these concessional rates. So it's a relatively simple setup where we'll provide a loan at a GCF rate to Hasbank, and then Hasbank can then bring down their own costs and provide a cheaper loan to the households and to the MSMEs and to whoever they're actually have a client base with, to provide them the access to climate finance and to encourage their own customers to uptake these climate technologies. So that's like Ivo and my other colleagues were saying, in these areas in Ulaanbaatar, pollution's a big issue. Emissions are a big issue, especially around household cook stoves and things like that. So by providing those the incentive to households and MSMEs to switch to more efficient ways of cooking and operating their households, that's what GCF can do, and that's how we're trying to create a paradigm shift and change customer behavior through this concessional finance. Thanks, Sabine. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And I think this is one of the things that we would also like to highlight is I think the role of financial institutions in energy efficiency, which is very big because I think local financing is critical to really meeting the targets, both the climate targets and the climate finance targets, and then involving and making sure that the local financial institutions are part of the game from the very beginning. Will help us to really kind of move things in a much more speedier or quicker way, if I may. But thank you for that question and on all the answers, everybody. Let me just move on to another question that we've gotten, which is pertaining to our last board. And so hang on there, Tom. I think this is more related to you and I as well. During the last board meeting, the private sector strategy was approved. Can you talk about some of the key elements and how it would benefit the project developer, and how would the guide, this EE guide, be part of that? You want to take a crack at this first, Tom, and then I can come in as well.
Yeah, I'll start off and then I'll throw it over to you. So the private sector strategy was approved by our board at the board meeting that just happened, and you said there's 4 parts to the strategy. Essentially, one is to promote a conducive investment environment for climate and economic growth activities. 2 is to accelerate innovation for business models, financial instruments, and climate technologies. 3 is to de-risk market-creating investments to crowd in private climate finance. And 4 is to strengthen domestic and regional financial institutions to scale up private climate finance. So essentially what we're saying here is that GCF wants to both build the capacity of local markets and also crowd in international finance into those local markets. So it's really 2 approaches to get the market ready domestically, and then also provide these de-risking through financial instruments to crowd in international investors into these local markets. So there's a few ways that we do that, and the strategy basically looks at what's been successful in the past with GCF, and also what we need to do more of. Things that we need to do better and that the strategy is going to help promote is to improve access to GCF funds. And so what we're doing is looking at the accreditation process and ways that we can smooth that out, make that more efficient, but at the same time, promoting access through a project-specific accreditation approach, which was a separate policy approved by GCF. So essentially, if you're a project developer and going through the GCF accreditation process doesn't make sense for you, because the accreditation process, is a longer-term relationship with GCF. So there's a lot of different types of assessments that we have to do. But if you're looking for an individual project that you would like to, access GCF concessional resources for, you can try to get accredited just for this specific project. And we're developing the tools and the way to do this now, but it'll be much, shorter than the full GCF accreditation process. And that will allow you to access the GCF funds for your specific project. In terms of instruments, we're also looking at ways that GCF can better help countries and investors to de-risk their investments. So if, some of the projects that we're looking at are providing guarantees or providing early stage equity investments that can really create platforms for a number of different investors to come in and finance a number of projects in developing countries. So a few things that we're looking at, and I think all of those are with the end goal in mind to allow easier access to GCF resources and to really crowd in the private sector that in a way that we weren't doing before at a larger scale. Sabine, maybe over to you for some more specifics on energy efficiency.
Yeah, no, I think you've addressed it very well, Tom. And I think from now as the financial institution person as well as an energy efficiency person, I think the private sector strategy is really kind of is built around energy efficiency. I think. I mean, if you look at it, the enabling environment to localize financing and everything else, and that is what is needed in the energy efficiency world. And I think that's what the guide is also trying to articulate as well, is about really kind of bringing in more private sector capital in different ways to be met. And I think the sector guide and then the private sector strategy really go hand in hand. So I think that's a key thing. And I think, and while while you were explaining this, I think one of the things that also popped up in my mind when I was thinking about this is what would be the link in really kind of and impact measures, and how can the private sector strategy as well as the energy strategy be linked on an impact point of view? And I think that would be a question that I would kind of like to address to Vlad, to see what is the significance, and what is it that the GCF can do through its new IRMF, as well as build the guides as well as the new strategies together, so that we have a coherent product that goes out to our AEs. And thoughts, Vlad?
Thank you, Sabine, for this question, and it's very important because the GCF is really an institution that invests into projects first and most of all to generate impact, and the measurement of impact is one of the key tasks that the fund undertakes. And the new Integrated Result Management Framework, or the IRMF, is the tool that will help both the fund and accredited entities better capture results and better report them, better measure them. And in this way, we can see to what extent the fund is really successful in supporting paradigm shifting, in supporting mitigation, and in supporting adaptation. The RMF helps us see on one side what happens with the public sector, but also with the private sector. And I think with the new private sector strategy on board, we'll be able to also see how the mobilization of private capital, which is vital both for energy efficiency and for other sectors, how this is going to really help us increase the impact of our investments. So definitely this is like one of the areas that we are looking at. And also, the RMF is one of the tools that actually provides the links among all the different sector strategies that have been developed by the fund, and helps us see how the investments in the different sectors really generate impact. I want to mention maybe a couple of things that can be helpful also from a result perspective for everybody interested in the energy efficiency guide. We have, of course, the policy, the Integrated Result Management Framework, but just a week ago, we uploaded on our website the result handbook. And this is kind of a very detailed guide on the different indicators that the GCF uses, and also on the development of theory of change. So I definitely recommend that everybody interested in applying the sector, also the sector guides, looks into the result handbook for the RMF when working on funding proposal. And probably one more thing that I want to add, that the fund currently has funding window for direct access entities that want to apply the new RMF. So if you're interested in that, I strongly recommend you also to access that, because that can help you transition to that, and that can also help very well in you measuring the results of your projects better. So let me stop here and hand over to Sabine.
Thank you, Vlad. And I think we're kind of running out of time, but we did get one more question, or actually two more questions from Lian. But the first one was on what was it? What is the role of results-based finance in energy efficiency? Right now, I think, Lian, I mean, we results-based financing, we're trying to basically utilize that. As I think Ivo also mentioned, in a couple of projects, like in the Kutzpa project in Kenya and Senegal, which is really basically on providing different types of instruments as the production levels are met in these companies. So I think it's a critical part of how we are looking at things. And then, as also you've asked, since most of the investment are not identified in the very beginning when the funding proposal is prepared, how does this come into effect? And the one way that we've been doing this is really about articulating what are the specific criteria that need to be met on that. So I mean, I think a good example of that is the EBRD high impact, where the whole framework is based upon the industries meeting certain criterias, and based on those criterias, and when they're met, then the results kick in, as that is a discount on their interest rate. So we're looking to that. And I think from our point of view, I think results-based financing is going to be critical as well, and we see that as a huge play in the market. And it's something that, as GCF, we are really looking at. And then I think the work that Vlad and his team, as well as Arupa and the team, are also doing in terms of bringing the country forward, as well as projects and monitoring forward. Then we're really kind of aligning things. So we are really looking at post-project monitoring systems to really have the eligibility criteria and the results identified at the get-go, but at the same time also through our APRs to make sure that whatever is said in the funding proposal is being met, so that so we are trying to walk the talk on this one. I mean, unless anybody has anything to add, I think we are about a minute over time. And so I would just first of all, like to thank all of the participants for joining us. And I think everybody mentioned this, and I would like to re-mention this again, that this is a draft, this is a working document. So we would really highly recommend and ask if you could please provide your comments to the sector guide document by August 6th. We will be incorporating those and then coming up with another version of that, which we will share. And then please do get in touch with us, the fund and the secretariat, on any questions that you have, any recommendations, so that we can incorporate those. But having said that, I would like to first of all thank all of you for joining us, and I would like to thank my esteemed panel, Vlad, Ivo, Anupa, Tom, Adrian, and Peggy, for joining me here, as well as I think I saw our director, Jerry, as well. And I would really like to thank the GCF events team, Selve, and Ani and Paul for their technical assistance on making this a very smooth process. So with that, I would like to sign off. And any questions that we have not answered, we will try to get back to you via email as well, just to let you know that your questions are very important to us, and we will address them. But please do send us your comments. With this, I would like to say thank you very much, and looking forward to a much more energy efficient work as we go forward. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.